exciting job of chairing 3 great speakers in evidence, global speakers. And I'd like to invite you to settle down so we could dig into the great stuff they have to share with us. So today we are going to be looking at policy engagement in evidence synthesis, and we are going to have 3 speakers. The first speaker will be Mogdarud from Epicenter, and she's going to be talking to us about evidence synthesis, the impact of policy relevant systematic reviews in international development. And we also have Thania, who will be talking to us about CONEVAL strategy for the synthesis of evidence, and Promise, who will be talking to us about the art and the science of using evidence in Africa.
I would like to present the CONEVAL strategy for the synthesis of evidence. So CONEVAL, it's not just that new institution. However, we are just getting our 12th anniversary. So it's an autonomous public institution that have 2 mandates. The first one is to evaluate the social development policy and programs, and the second one is to measure poverty at national and subnational level. And we are, although we are public, a governmental institution, we always have technical and administrative autonomy because our board is integrated by 6 academic advisors that they are partially work at CONEVAL, but they take all the important decisions. And the decisions they take, the executive secretary has to implement it. So, what for here in Mexico we want to generate evidence? Of course, we have the first thing and the obvious thing is because we want to improve social policies. Of course, as I talk, our mandate is to improve social policies. So the evidence is aiming to that. So since its creation, we have coordinated more than 2,800 evaluation, all of social policies, but also of strategies. But also, we have been elaborating some documents that summarize the evaluation results in order to inform decision making. In other workshops, we have been talking about that generating evidence is really important, but it's important if it's used. So we are doing a lot of things in order to synthesize evidence. So of course, this has been a process, and what I'm talking about is what are the steps we have been taking for these 12 years, in these 12 years. So, as I said, we have made a lot of different types of evaluations, but also of studies. One of it is the considerations for the budget allocation process that we produce each year, and we take it to the Congress in order to have information for the budgeting process. Thank you. So, what have been doing to synthesize evidence? The first thing, of course, we have been promoting impact evaluations. This was our first step. The second step was developing capacities for generating sophisticated users, because it's not only to do impact evaluations, but to people to use them. So we have been working a lot in developing capacities for sophisticated users. And the third step was wrapping up based on evidence. So let me show you what have been done at CONEVAL. The first one is, of course, promoting impact evaluations. There has been not a lot of evaluations, 49, because as you may know, is not always an easy thing, but also it's not always a useful thing to do impact evaluations about every policy. The second step is we have this capacity strategy that is called the Impact Evaluation Incubator. So what we do with this is that we have this, we invite all government stakeholders, and we have this week with them, a training week, that in the morning they hear about the basic concepts on methodologies on impact evaluation. And in the afternoon, they get around to start designing with some experts in impact evaluation, the design of an impact evaluation of their program. So this incubator, we have been doing it for 6 years now, and we have been training around 60 federal programs, and I don't know, maybe like 150 people. The third thing was, of course, wrapping up based on evidence. So, of course, we learn from specialized organizations what works: Clearinghouse, the Camel Collaboration, 3IE, Cochrane Library. And what we said is, second, analyze the methodological strategies for the synthesis of evidence and its characteristics. Systematic reviews, meta-analysis, evidence gap maps. But the third was to define a feasible strategy for CONEVAL, because what we just find is that we can do all the things that these specialized organizations are doing, but we have to do something in order to wrap up the evidence. So we did 3 things. The first one is a repository of direct sources of evidence relevant to the Mexican context. So for this, what we do is we take all the systematic reviews of these institutions. Of course, we translate it in Spanish, and we put it in a matrix in order to categorize in themes that we know the stakeholders wanted to know. The second one was the evidence gap maps, that of course we just have 2, and the first one we did it with 3IE, and it's on this, food security, and the second one we just launched it, and it's about the Mexican evidence gap map. And the third thing we did is make a practical guideline for the improvement of public policy. Here, the first thing was to identify relevant questions that the political stakeholder have. So after that, what we do is just identify the problem and its diagnosis here in Mexico, the identification of the public policies that the government already has in order to address it. The third was to search and select the evidence. Of course, select not only in quality and rigorous, but also in the contextual environment that Mexico has. Let me explain. If the government tried to put give some new tickets or stamp food for poor families, we address or we search for evidence doing that thing. So the people, the stakeholders, the political stakeholders, were interested in this practical guideline. So the 5 was the preparation of final report. The other thing was that we knew that people do not read, especially the implementers. So what we wanted is to to attract their attention. So we did a really visual strategy. So we have been doing, right now we have 6 practical guidelines with different problems that you can have it in the website. So each practical guideline has the same structure: problem diagnosis, related interventions, search for evidence, mapping evidence, and what can we learn from the evidence. So this is an example of the first one, that is for chronic child malnutrition. So we examine around 1,000 impact evaluations, and we, of course, like a systematic review, categorize it for its quality, but also for their outcomes. So afterwards, we make this infography in order to disseminate the evidence. So what we do in one page is first tell about the diagnosis. In Mexico, in every 7 children under 5 suffer from chronic malnutrition. The causes: inadequate diet and acute diarrheal diseases, the effects, and then which interventions work and which do not. About positive impact, inconclusive impact, null impact, and interviews whose studies are not rigorous. So I think we try to make evidence sexy. So I know it's a really, it's a thing that when we are evaluators, we try to do all the time in order to attract the attention. But we have been doing this for 6 practical guidelines, and I think we're getting a little bit of more attention than the other one. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Thania. That was right on time. I think you saved us 3 minutes. So we have more time for questions. So would you like to take the questions immediately, or should we can do this at the end, so we have enough time? Yeah, okay. So, promise?
Right, hi everyone, my name is Promise. I'm from the Africa Center for Evidence based in South Africa at the University of Johannesburg. If I can get the presentation, okay. Right, thank you. So the focus of my presentation is on the art and science of using evidence in Africa, and we analyze this using an evidence map and synthesis of what we know about, initiatives to support the increased demand for and the use of evidence in African countries. But I think the first question is really, why are we doing this? And I think the main reason why we're doing this is that we've actually noticed that there's quite a lot of activities and evidence on evidence-informed policymaking in LMICs, but there's little cross-learning, synthesis, and transfer of products, of practice, and in actual fact, there's increased production production in EIPM, and also increased production of research. I think what we can see in those pictures, specifically the map, is some of the organizations that we identified that are working towards EIPM, and also what you also see is actually an evaluation of a program that was designed to increase the use of research evidence. But I think despite the fact that we have an increase in practice of EIPM or in research, what we actually notice is that, in actual fact, we're also guilty of that as a center, is that we actually work on single cases and contexts, specifically when we design our strategies going forward. And so essentially we're just basically drawing on our own experiences largely. And also we also notice that there's sectorial and geographical silos. So maybe those who are in West Africa work with people who are in West Africa, and those who are in Southern Africa work with those who are in Southern Africa. And also, knowledge is organized within professions. So for instance, teachers work with teachers, doctors work with doctors. But now the challenge in that is that as a result, there's actually little shared practice and approaches despite these shared problems across the continent and even globally. So this is just to highlight the objectives of the map that I'm going to show you eventually. Firstly, just to assess the existing evidence on intervention supporting African decision makers' use of evidence. We also need to understand these EIDM interventions that have been actually evaluated and to what extent, which is basically the size of the evaluation literature, and also just to get a glimpse of the existing patterns and characteristics of this evidence base, and more importantly, to make this map accessible through open access. But first thing first, what is an evidence map? So what you see here is definitions from different angles. We actually have technical definitions and empirical definition. We like to largely focus on the empirical definition, but what is quite nice about the empirical definition is actually it encapsulates the aspects or issues highlighted within the definition from the technical terms. Like for instance here, Miyake Lee defines this, the evidence map as a systematic search of a broad field to identify gaps, and just to highlight the identification of gaps that is also encapsulated in the empirical definition there. And we also have Beta, who defines an EGM an evidence gap map as thematic collections of evidence structure around the framework. And this is more, if you look at the empirical definition, that's encapsulated in the aspect of online databases. And the inclusion criteria for MAP. So we are mainly focusing on Africa, geographical-wise. We're actually entirely focusing on Africa, and decision makers in policy and practice. And this decision making that we're looking at is actually at all levels. So it could be individuals, it could be organizations, it could be at an institutional level as well. And interventions, any intervention program that exists to promote EIDM, so for instance, capacity building programs, but just to make it a point at this stage that we're not focusing on supply side interventions such as financial incentive to promote research. And in terms of study design, focusing on empirical studies that evaluate or investigate an applied EIDM intervention. And primary outcomes, so eventually this is all about evidence use or the practice of EIDM. And we also consider development impact. But also, ideally at the end of the day, the main outcome is evidence use, but also focus on intermediate outcomes that are actually drawn from the conceptualization framework, which is CMO, capability to use evidence, motivation, and opportunity as well. And just to point it out that the interventions that we're looking at are also actually drawn from the science of using science. But we'll look at those when we look at the map, what those interventions that we're looking at. And here, just to present the search results, we had roughly around close to 14,000 studies drawn from academic databases as well as grey literature. And these additional sources actually include grey literature and backward and forward searches, for instance. And eventually, after screening, both at abstract and full text, the map actually includes 87 studies. Now, this is the final product, the glimpse of this product. So what you see on your vertical axis, it's not all of them that highlight. I think there are 3 that are there. And what you see on the horizontal axis is the actual outcomes themselves. But I think for us to really appreciate what is going on there is if we look at the interactive map itself. So I'm just gonna go that side, so you're not gonna see my face. Oh yeah, okay. Right. Perfect. So first thing first, let me just highlight the interventions that we looked at, drawn from the science of use design. So there's 6 of them. And yeah, and then the outcomes highlighted on the horizontal axis. Like we said earlier on, eventually evidence use is the final primary outcome. And we also have development impact, but the intermediate outcomes, which is capability, motivation, they are also highlighted there. So what does this map show us from an overview? If you just scroll up and down, you can see that in terms of awareness, we basically find no evidence in that regard. And a bit around the second intervention there. And I think most of the evidence lies between M3 and M5, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So just to maybe also discuss the design features and the interactiveness of this map, if as you're seeing he's putting the case on the map, and what you see is basically the results of within a specific bubble of the type of intervention and the type of outcome. And if you click on that bubble, what you basically see is all the, in this case, this is an abstract of the first study that is there. So all the 29 references are listed. In this case, they're listed in the 3rd column, but we're seeing the abstract of the first study within that bubble. And what we also see there is the link to the PDF itself. And yeah, you can also see the authors, and yeah. So if you want to dive more into the PDF and understand better, what you actually do is just click on that link. And yeah, I think we can move to the filter functions, this map. So some of the filters in this case, firstly, so this map is looking at art and science of EIPM. And so these studies were divided into 2. You can actually, if you want to filter just to see studies focusing on the art of EIPM, you just click on one filter, update the map, and as you can actually see that all these are green. The green studies are in green, they're looking at the art of EIDM. And you can do also the same for the science. And maybe just use another example for a different filter. If you want to see maybe art, but within a specific country, say art in South Africa, you can also do that. Update the map. It's showing you studies focusing on the art of EIPM only in South Africa, and you can also do the same for several other different countries. And you can also do the same for all these features, the other filters that are there. These are the ones that we included here, but there could be more. Right. So that's basically the functionality of the map. Thank you, Lawrence. So just to proceed and finish off, I was saying thank you to Lawrence for helping me with the presentation. technology is letting us down there. Yes. So I think in simple terms, when you're looking at the art of fusing around EIPM, it's more focusing on more focused on the policymakers' perceptions and actions. Yet the science is more related to what we as researchers research on and look at the mechanisms of, from production to leading to the eventual evidence use. Yeah. Yep, can move on to the next one. Yep, so this is basically, okay, I'm almost done. Snapshot country analysis of where these studies lie. So you can see majority are from Nigeria. I can actually tell you, I actually know the culprit in terms of why we have so many studies come from Nigeria, and also the geographical map of where these studies are located. And we can move on to also look at sectoral analysis, which is basically, yeah. So a majority of these studies actually from the health sector. And in terms of publication date, for me, I think this is an indication of the growth in general EIPM. Majority of those studies are within the last around 5 to 6 years. And that brings us to the end. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Promise. Magdarud, you have the floor.
Hi, yes, finally I found my slides. Not yet, okay. Today, my presentation, I'm going to be talking about the work led by Sandy Oliver and still ongoing work looking at the impact of evidence seismic reviews in international development. I acknowledge Sandy and my colleague Kushna who work in this project, and also from the IOE and UCL and UK Department for International Development for the financial support. Conflict of interest, we provide support for the reviews investigated in these studies. Okay, I'm going to touch very briefly why impact assessment. At system level, there is increasing demand in terms of to demonstrate the impact for various reasons. One of them is about accountability and value for money for the funding organization to allocate resources and funding. And also in terms of impact assessment tool can be useful in terms of give us understand better in terms of shapes and form of research that showing impact, so we can reduce waste in research. And the two impact assessment tool can be useful in terms of providing communication, influencing policy and practice and public in terms of what we are working. So what is impact? There is many types of definitions of impact. For this work, we draw on the UK research and innovation terms, which is see the impact as the contribution of not only within academia, but also beyond academia in terms of social and economic impact. So in terms of this project, we aim to understand how can the impact assessment tool can be used to assess the impact of systematic review in international development. To what extent the reviews in this area is used and has been used in academia and beyond academia. The methods, right? We based on 83 reviews supported by epicenters. To identify the impact, basically we search on Google Scholar particularly to look at the academic impact in terms of citations. We also search on Google to look at the impact on wider, beyond academic impact. In case of reviews published in peer-reviewed journals with DOI or digital object identifier, we can use the altmetric systems, which can pull the data from social media like Twitter and Facebook, or from traditional media like a newspaper, blogs, or online reference management systems. We also look at specialist systematic review databases like 3IE, Social System Evidence Aid database, Campbell, UNICEF, MegaMaps. So from that, we then code study, try to extract and study impact we identify using framework or impact assessment tool we use in this study. Basically, we look at two domains. One is academic impact, and the other one is impact beyond academia. So what we mean by impact within academia? We look at 3 dimensions using 3 indicators. One is basically looking whether the reports are published as academic outputs, so whether it's published by their host institutions or published in the peer-reviewed journals. We look at whether the report itself cited by academic authors. We also look at whether the academic outputs has been cited by academic authors. So in terms of measuring impact beyond academia, we look at 3 dimensions based on the UKRI definition, instrumental, conceptual, and capacity building. And look at key indicator within dimension is instrumental. We look at whether the knowledge or result from the reviews is used directly to inform policy and program. For example, whether evidence from systematic review is cited in the business cases or program reviews within the organization. For conceptual impact, we looked at whether evidence or finding from reviews used in terms of building knowledge or sharing knowledge on the topics. We also look at whether the knowledge from the reviews itself prompt debates within the topic. For example, whether the review cited is used in the blogs or repackages the review to be, using more plain language so it can be understood by the wider audience. The capacity building domain, we look at whether evidence access into the knowledge tool system, whether the evidence or reviews be listed or included in evidence gap maps or searchable databases or portal, or whether the evidence is used has become embedded process. For example, the review has been included in reading list in the university or training programs. So this indicator, we try to look at the reports of systematic review, whether we found evidence in the impact. So the findings based on 83 reviews, 78% or 65 reviews found to have evidence of impact of any kind, academics or beyond academics. 75% or 63 reviews, we found evidence of academic impact, and about 60%, 59%, we found evidence beyond academia. We found 18% that we found no evidence at all of impact when we conducted reviews. In terms of academic impact breakdown by indicators, basically 70% of 83 reviews, we found that report has been cited in academic literature. Surprisingly low in terms of only 15 reviews has been published as academic outputs. And within that, only 10 reviews has been cited in academic literature. So 15 reviews published as academic outputs, whether journals, articles, and that 15 has been signed by other academic authors. For the academic impact beyond academia, 33% of 83 reviews found to be used on conceptual impact. 28% found to have impact on capacity building, and only about 1/5 of the reviews found to have the impact in terms of instrumental use. I will give you some examples of what evidence we found. So, for example, conceptual use, one review on conditional cash transfer was cited in the World Bank. UNDP and DFID cite one review to understand the work that done in the developing country in terms of the work around corruption. And we found several systemic reviews were cited in the reports produced by GSDRC Knowledge Services, which is kind of rapid response services to inform policy teams at DFID. Capacity building impact, we found 13 reviews were included in Campbell collaboration UNICEF megamaps, which then were used to produce the research briefs. Nutrition intervention as optional were included in the leading list for the course in the US university. And 2 systemic reviews were indexed on this platform, which provide free access to research in international development. So, for example, of instrumental use, 6 reviews were used to support DFID business cases for policy intervention program. 1 review was used by UNICEF to draw on the plan to inform its strategic plan, and 1 review was used in the process of the developing guideline by WHO. So this kind of example that we found in our work, and we have more detail in the report, which is to be finalized. So after doing this work, we want to look more in depth in terms of what might facilitate evidence use beyond academia. So we think about different kind of factors. So I'm going to present some ideas that we try to investigate. One is about policy sectors. These 83 reviews are commissioned by DFID. The review question come from them. So we want to understand whether reviews on particular topics might get used more often than the others. So we look at our portfolio, different topics, policy sector that we have, and we try to understand whether topics get used more often than the other. And we did some kind of basic descriptive analysis, and we found no trend in terms of what type of topic that get more used beyond academia. For example, 14 of 17 reviews, or 84% reviews on the topic of human development and education get used very often. And only for another example, only 41% of reviews produced on investment and growth found to have impact beyond academia. So we also want to look further from the model of the communications, research communication and uptaking. We draw on the work from Lewis and Delta, which is published about 10 years ago, looking at different models of research uptakes. One model, we look at the linear relationships to understand whether research production if the report outputs having clear research policy recommendation, whether it can influence the impact beyond academia or not. We look across 83 reviews, and we found that when review report recommendation clearly, more reviews seen having impact beyond academia comparing to have those having no recommendations or have a vague recommendations. Another model that we're looking at is relationship model. Basically, we want to look at whether interaction, engagement between research team and policy team could influence the impact beyond academia or not. So we look at the reports to see whether if they report policy input could influence, could see the impact beyond academia. So the findings saying, well, confirm, see the trend that if the review report policy input into their work, more of them having impact beyond academia, comparing to those having no input of the policy report in their work. So this kind of thinking can inform us to do another analysis within 83 reviews to see whether what kind of factors that could play part in terms of influencing impact beyond academia. So the last slide for me is about reflecting on the challenging in terms of doing this work. So the main limitation of this work is about how we did the work because it's cross-sectional. And we look at only documents, research report of these 83 reviews. We didn't do any data collection in terms of interviews of stakeholders, actors in the program. So we didn't say the impact from their perspective. And we did only single data collections. In terms of capture the impact from the report, we feel like sometimes the impact can be seen as a process rather than the outcome or can be easily captured from the report itself. We found that the category of the impact beyond academia, like a conceptual impact, instrumental, is quite overlapping, is they have blur boundaries as well, so we have to might have to look at that again. In terms of time scale of the impact, it could take many years to, the reviews or research can show some kind of impact. So the question is, when we should stop looking for the impact, how long we should keep looking for the impact. From our work, we found that about 30 reviews, or 30% of the reviews show some kind of evidence of the impact beyond academia within 2 years. And we still find impact beyond academia of the products or reviews that are published in the past 7 years. So, still thinking what the time scale for impact that we should be looking at. In terms of the process itself, we did the work looking at research first, and then trace up to see the impact. I think might be more efficient to look at the impact first and trace down to see what type of research that might be influenced or shaped the impact that they have. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have about 11 minutes for questions. So we would probably be able to take about 3 questions maybe. Yes, please.
Thank you. This is an open question. In your experience, what would be the best strategy for approaching decision makers with these evidence products in order to make them effectively use these products? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentations. I just wondered, a lot of the time we talk about policymakers and what would make policymakers to use research. I just wondered if there's any studies out there to look at it from the other side. What would incentivize researchers to better target policy and impact?
Thank you. Well, in CONEVAL, we heard that we have the infographics that are useful not only to policymakers, also for the social community. So is there any other example for the other experiences that make this more open to all of the people?
Thank you for your questions. I think I'll take an aim at the first question about the best way to approach decision makers to encourage them to use these evidence synthesis products. I think we're all battling with that in a way. I think it's something that is contextual, unique in every situation, in my view. I think, when was it? I think, was it yesterday or the day before in one of the workshops when we were talking about stakeholder engagement, asked a similar question, you know, because that whole stakeholder engagement session presented by Sandy was, you know, trying to find the best ways to engage stakeholders, in this case, policymakers. And my reflections and my questions, my actual comment was, I think I was motivated and encouraged that there is an initiative to do that, because, so I reflected on the situation in my country, right? Because remember, I said this is contextual. We want to be realistic. Situations differ from country to country. Say in Africa, if I reflect on my own country, Zimbabwe, there's so much that is going on there. Policymakers or government officials, I can tell you now, this will be something that is very extremely secondary, because what they are focusing on is looting resources. But I think the best thing would be to remain hopeful. We have so many different strategies that we can try, but I think at the end of the day, my best solution would be to start developing relationships within government relationships, either formally or informally. And then you can take it from there, especially in, you know, contexts that are very fragile and difficult. That's yeah.
I just want to add to Promise response in terms of, yes, it's not just evidence use itself, but also the policy side as well, that they need to understand, you know, the importance of the evidence, how that can be used to inform their decisions. So, like you said, the relationship between the two, research producer and research user have to be aligned in terms of how to use it and you know, how make it best from their work.
Thank you for your questions. They were very, very interesting. I think I tried to answer both of them. I think that the best strategy to approach policymakers, but also to incentivize researchers, is persuade them that this will be helpful in their own agenda. When here at CONEVAL, we get to work with a lot of researchers in order to do evaluations, but they are not always interested in doing or in taking these kind of evaluations, because it's not quite their line of investigation or research. So I think the persuasion face-to-face, in order to meet some incentives to address their agenda, will be the best strategy.
Okay, so any more questions? Because we still have 5 minutes, but it's okay if everybody enjoyed the talk. Yes, please, last question.
Well, thank you. But more than a question, it's actually a compliment. I mean, a very big compliment, because what you are doing, you know, especially in South Africa and here in Mexico, is really wow. I mean, top notch. Trying to harness all the evidence that exists and make it as easily accessible to policymakers and program managers, no, as possible. I don't think what else can you do to bring the horse to the source of water. No? And I think just reflecting on this study, no, the EPI, I think they pointed out two well-known, I mean, factors. I mean, clear recommendations, the involvement of the policy input. I think that's what Promise also highlighted in the previous session, and also Thania mentioned, no, as a key success factor. No? So I think these experiences should be disseminated well far beyond this group, actually, to every country, if I may say. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you everybody, and I think we've had a great evening, great talks, so have a nice evening.